Hundreds of thousands dead, millions displaced.
The Syrian secret police got a lot better at monitoring social media.
The war is being fought both on the battlefield and online.
If you compromise them, Assad could come and have them arrested and then killed.
Hackers connected to the Syrian regime are targeting the opposition.
ISIS is almost adopting everything that was successful in Syria.
Sometimes the consequences are lethal.
Was he a skilled hacker?
Definitely, which is why I'm guessing he got so high up within the Islamic State.
Is Syria the model for how future wars will be fought? As a national security reporter for Vice, I followed the Syrian war since the beginning. In 2011, a popular democracy movement blew up across the Middle East. It was fueled in part by social media, became known as the Arab Spring. Yet Syria was different. It stayed quiet. Run by a dictator named Bashar al-Assad, citizens were terrorized by secret police, mass surveillance, torture, and barely had any access to the internet. Amidst protests in nearby countries, the Assad regime made the mistake of restoring access to Facebook and YouTube. Almost overnight, protests exploded across the country. I needed to talk to someone who was on the streets when protests first went down.
3 weeks after I got there, the street protests began, and that quickly overshadowed everything else we were doing.
Robert Ford was the last U.S. ambassador to serve in Syria.
So when he did open up the internet, it couldn't have just been for benevolent reasons. There must have been also a surveillance aspect to it.
When the revolution in Syria started, initially, I don't think the regular foot police and secret police goons really understood what social media was. I met once with a protester, and he was detained. This was in the suburbs of Damascus. When he was taken to the secret police station, they went through his backpack in front of him, and they were taking everything out, and they said, "Where is the Facebook? Where is the Facebook?" As if it was like a book with pages. So that was early on. As time went on, the Syrian secret police got a lot better at monitoring people's computers and monitoring social media.
Protests continued, but Assad wouldn't cede his power. Instead, he sent soldiers to try and quell the uprising. The world watched the bloody crackdown play out on YouTube. Dilshad Othman was uploading videos to YouTube and Facebook during the early days of the revolution. It made him a target of the government, and he had to flee the country. For his safety, we chose an anonymous location to talk.
Video content was the most important content coming out from Syria. We've lost a lot of our friends while they were filming.
Snipers targeting people with cameras?
Absolutely, sniper targeting people, or checkpoint will stop you and check what's in your phones.
But was the regime able to crack into Facebook, or at least hack into it in some way, and get some of that information that would help them crack down on protesters?
Yes, they were able to get a lot of accounts. They were able to hack into a lot of Syrian opposition leaders at that time. And going back to May 2011, that was the first time when the Syrian government implemented man-in-the-middle attack against the SSL certificate of Facebook.
And explain to me what a man-in-the-middle attack is.
The term man-in-the-middle attack came because there is someone in the middle is trying to attack you. What the Syrian government did at that time is they pushed to the users a fake SSL certificate. Now, SSL is actually like an envelope and a key. Key is with Facebook. Facebook is sending you an envelope to put your data in, lock it, and then send it back to Facebook. But the Syrian internet providers, they received the envelope from Facebook. They replaced it with another one that they have the key for it.
Their own envelope.
Send it to the Syrian users. Users, they put their credentials, username and passwords, and messaging and posts and etc. stuff. They send it back. Syrian internet providers opened it, got a copy of data, then send it back to Facebook.
Assad was now using the internet to expose entire networks of activists. Once identified, they were often arrested, then tortured, sometimes to death. The international media exploded with headlines detailing police crackdowns and tales of torture, creating a public relations nightmare for Assad. Soldiers defected from Assad's forces. Some formed the Free Syrian Army, and the country descended into war between rebels and the regime. But Assad still had his supporters, some of whom were hackers. they decided to form a cyber militia. They called it the Syrian Electronic Army. Brian Merchant is a reporter at Motherboard who investigated the origins of the group. We met up at Vice's head offices in Brooklyn.
The Syrian Electronic Army is an activist hacker group. They're pro-Bashir al-Assad. They want to reveal the media as frauds. They want to reveal the Free Syrian Army as terrorists. And to do so, they basically institute a series of high-profile attacks.
So they're just propagandists?
Ultimately, that's what their role is, is propagandists.
They were mostly website defacements, but sometimes they had real-world consequences. The SEA hacked the Twitter account of the Associated Press and tweeted that the White House had been attacked. It caused the US stock market to dive until it was exposed to be a fake tweet. At the top of the militia hierarchy was a hacker known as the Pro. Brian received a tip allegedly exposing the Pro's identity. He contacted him.
I had been asking him, we have this information about you, and we basically can peg you as the leader. And he got really flustered and angry, and he denied it in a series of emails, and he said, if you reveal me, then you will be hacked. We will hack Vice.
Brian published his expose. The Pro made good on his word, and Vice was hacked. I decided to track down the Pro. He agreed to chat online. I asked him if the army of hackers viewed themselves as soldiers. He said internet soldier was the preferred term. The real soldiers were on the battlefield. I wanted to know if the SEA was under the official control of Assad. The Pro was adamant that they weren't affiliated with the government regime, but that they did use back channels to deliver important intelligence. Those channels proved potentially dangerous for opposition protesters.
They were capable of collecting a lot of information, hacking a lot of people. They published around 11,000 accounts. They were compromised in different ways.
And then passing this along to the regime?
Absolutely. We've seen a lot of organizing between them and the Syrian government, exchanging information between each other and exchanging targets between each other.
Months after speaking with him, the Pro, or Ahmed Umar Aga, as Brian identified, was indicted for hacking-related charges by the US government. The Syrian Electronic Army gained the attention of the world through PR-savvy hacks, but they weren't Assad's only hacker allies. In Syria, what began as a popular democracy movement rapidly escalated into a civil war. Assad had responded on the battlefield with an aggressive campaign of barrel bombs. Online, the Syrian internet was now infected with malware. Ava Galperin is a hacker. She started tracking cyber militias shortly after the street protests turned into a bloody conflict. It wasn't long before her research revealed the dangerous new militia known as the Syrian Malware Team. They were using the internet to gather intelligence on opposition forces.
To begin with, there isn't just sort of one Syrian malware team. We were able to track at least two distinct actors in this space. These two malware groups were targeting members of the Syrian opposition, so anybody who was opposed to Assad. And mostly these were people who are located inside of Syria, sometimes in territory that Assad still controlled, sometimes in territory that Assad no longer controlled, and sometimes members of the Syrian diaspora, which became sort of more influential and more powerful as the conflict has raged on and more people have left.
And the tools they were using were very different.
Yes, the malware teams that we were tracking were using remote access tools like Extreme Rat, Dark Comet, Black Shades.
And something like a rat, how does it work exactly?
So a remote access tool is a tool that once an attacker gets you to install it on your machine, allows them to do anything that you can do on your computer. So they can log all of your keystrokes, they can take screenshots, they can see through your webcam, they can listen through your microphone, anything that you're capable of doing, they can do, and then they can exfiltrate that data back to themselves. And these remote access tools are very cheap or free, but they can still get you, full control of somebody's computer if you can get somebody to install them on their computer.
In 2012, Assad's forces used Dark Comet to monitor opposition groups in Aleppo. They hid the malware in a PDF that claimed to hold instructions on how to help the city, which was under siege by the regime. As soon as the target downloaded the PDF, the malware was installed, and Assad's opponents were under surveillance.
And these were people that were still in Syrian territory and territory controlled by Assad. And so if you compromise them, things got very, very dangerous for them because Assad could come and have them, arrested and then killed.
The cyberspace in Syria now is ridiculously dirty, full of malware, full of phishing, full of a lot of cyber attacks that it really made it unsafe space for end users.
Different factions looking for intelligence they can feed to their groups.
They don't care if it's malware, if it's going to open a backdoor in your machine to some other factor. They don't care. They just need to get access.
Sounds a lot like the actual war.
It is exactly like the actual war. It is 100% a reflect for the actual war that's happening.
Soon, Dark Comet was used to further escalate Syria's cyber war. Pro-Assad hackers, difficult to attribute but now all over the Syrian internet, launched an attack designed to steal battle plans from the Free Syrian Army. The plans detailed a strategy to retake the town of Kirbit Gazaleh, a key city for the rebellion. Nart Villeneuve was working as a researcher for FireEye when he first discovered the hack, and he was the perfect person to tell me how the battle plans were stolen.
There was hand-annotated maps. Pictures of them were taken with cell phones and distributed to the fighting units. Lists of individuals with their names, phone numbers, whether or not they had weapons. That stuff is extremely valuable in a conflict zone.
The hack wasn't technically complex. Instead, it relied on social engineering, a technique where hackers trick their targets through psychological manipulation. Hackers initiated contact through Skype, presenting themselves as beautiful women.
They would initiate conversations, try to establish a little bit of rapport with them, ask them to send them a picture of themselves, flatter them a little bit, and then say, do you want to see a picture of me? When they would send that picture, really that was the malware. They would compromise that individual, and then they would be able to harvest this full Skype chat histories of anyone else who used that computer as well. We obviously can't jump straight to concluding who's ultimately responsible, but it definitely looks like it is a group that is acting to benefit the Assad regime and has some sort of connection to Lebanon.
It made sense that hackers in Lebanon, possibly affiliated with Hezbollah, might be supporting Assad. Hezbollah is Iran's political proxy in Lebanon, and Iran is the Syrian regime's ally.
We found a document that is supposedly a leaked document from Syrian intelligence that we can't verify that talks about the exact tactics that we see this group using to target the opposition, including the use of fake female personas to try to entrap individuals and other efforts to discredit the opposition online.
By 2013, Hezbollah was engaging Syrian rebels on the battlefield. Now, pro-Assad hackers based in Lebanon were engaging them in cyberspace too. But support from Syria's allies wasn't enough for Assad to keep an emerging threat at bay: the Islamic State. In Syria, the war was causing the country to fracture. Then ISIS arrived. The jihadis set up their capital in Raqqa. They took over the land and unleashed a wave of terror. Like the Electronic Army and the malware teams that had come before them, the Islamic State would also go after their opponents on the digital front line. Their crimes were documented in high-profile execution videos, distributed over the internet.
نشعر بأن هؤلاء ليسوا من البشر من شيء. لكن بداية هم عندما ينشرون هذه الأشرطة إعلاميا هم يريدون أن يوجهوا رسالة إرهاب لكل من هو تحت سلطة هؤلاء.
Rami Abdul Rahman knows what it's like to be targeted by ISIS. He's a Syrian activist who now lives in the UK after seeking asylum over 15 years ago. His work exposing war crimes in Syria made him a target. He was hacked by the terror group's supporters, photoshopped in front of Jihadi John, the infamous ISIS executioner. His data was targeted and his server was destroyed.
How did that make you feel to see yourself in an orange jumpsuit?
بشكل مؤكد كانت هذه المرة الأولى التي شعرت فيها بتهديد جدي وشعرت فيها أن الموت قريب مني. يعني ما الغريب أن يطالوك في بريطانيا وهناك مئات الجهاديين من بريطانيا ذهبوا للانضمام إلى هذا التنظيم. من الممكن أن يأتي شخص في بريطانيا ويقول أنا أقتلك ليتقرب إلى الله مثل ما يفعله في سوريا بعد أن يتعرض لعملية غسيل دماغ.
But who was behind the hack? I'd already been communicating with Islamic State fighters online. Some of them were as easy as a text message away. Junaid Hussein was allegedly one of these fighters. In Syria, he was known as Abu Hussein al-Britani, the architect of the Islamic State's cyber army. But before he traveled to Syria to join ISIS, Junaid was a regular kid from England, best known as Trick, of the now disbanded UK hacking collective, Team Poison. I traveled to Newcastle to meet with Junaid's former hacking colleague, MLT. For security reasons, we can't show his face.
What was Trick like back in the day before all of this Islamic State stuff?
A few years ago, he was just sort of normal. He'd come out for a drink. He enjoyed all the things sort of normal British people did, because he was British. He was, like, grew up here, went to school here and everything.
Trick hacked the email of Tony Blair's personal assistant. Together with MLT, he flooded the anti-terror hotline of MI6 with prank phone calls.
Do you know about Team Poison?
Oh, yeah. I've heard about Team Poison, yeah.
We embarrass governments and the police.
Yeah. Okay.
They did it as an act of political protest, but also for the lulz. It got them both arrested, but only Junaid went to jail.
Did prison change Junaid?
Yeah, definitely became a lot more bitter, a lot more sort of hard-nosed, he sort of withdrew into himself. Became a lot less outgoing, became a lot less, like, up for a laugh. He became a lot more serious, and then that's when he started really getting into, like, hating the UK government, hating the authorities, and I think he felt a lot more, like, persecuted, a lot more unwanted by society.
How did he radicalize?
I honestly don't know. Like, it just seemed to happen like that. Like, it didn't seem to be a gradual process at all. It was just like he was normal, sound guy, and then I don't know when it exactly happened, but I think it started in prison.
Because I guess after the Tony Blair hack, he was probably one of the most famous hackers in Britain.
Yeah, exactly. So his profile was out there, he was in the news, people knew about him. So I'm not sure whether they reached out to him or if he reached out to them, but it just seemed to happen overnight, and then obviously he ended up going to Syria. I was still in contact with him when he was over there, but I couldn't consider him a friend anymore, like, considering what he was involved with.
Was he a skilled hacker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, sort of getting into Facebook accounts wasn't really a thing for him. You could just do it like that, which is why I'm guessing he got so high up within the Islamic State. Obviously, they valued his skills and ability, and he was a massive target for the USA. If he was that big a target, that was for a reason.
In August 2015, Junaid was killed in a US airstrike. But before he was assassinated, Junaid is thought to have carried out another cyber attack. This one was designed to expose the location of the Islamic State's critics so they could be captured and killed. In Syria, cyber attacks were used by groups affiliated with the Assad regime to wage war online. When ISIS arrived, they seemed to adopt similar techniques to target their opponents. ISIS claims the men being executed in this video are members of Raqqas being slaughtered silently, a group of activists who document and expose the atrocities of the so-called Islamic State. Hamoud Mohammed Al-Mosa is in charge of cybersecurity for the group. He agreed to Skype with me from an undisclosed location.
Hamoud, do you want to explain to me how ISIS was hunting down members of your organization online?
حمود كيف ايسيس كانوا عم يلاحقوكم على الانترنت، يعني كيف قدروا يوصلوا لكم او اذا قدروا؟
وصلني على الايميل باتش مشفر شخص ادعى انه هو من الحكومه الكنديه حابب يعمل بحث ودراسات عن مدينه الرقه، فبعث لي مجموعه صور من الرقه حابين نتاكد من مكانها واذا فيكم تحطوا لنا اللوكيشن تبعها كارقام. هو الرساله كلها كان مشكوك فيها انه الحكومه الكنديه ما بتجي تحاكيني بالطريقه هاي او ما بتجي تطلب مني انا كشخص او كمجموعه هيك طلبات. اخذت الملف حللنا بعد التحليل طلع هو باتش لمراقبه اللوكيشن والسيطره على الجهاز بشكل كامل.
He can't fully prove it, but Hamoud believes Junaid Hussain orchestrated the attack so that ISIS could locate and kill their opposition. Fortunately, Hamoud wasn't fooled by the phishing attack, and he didn't download the malware. But did others, and were they killed as a result?
ISIS is almost adopting everything that was successful in Syria. We're talking about images, we're talking about video, we're talking about cyber attacks.
And again, these were techniques that were essentially tried and true from earlier phases of the Syrian civil war.
Exactly. And then here we are, they're adopting it again.
The war in Syria showed that armies of hackers can assist soldiers in the battlefield because the tools are both easy to use and free to acquire.
This is a set of tools that are increasingly available to everybody. So the whole idea is that these tools are no longer just in the hands of the Chinese or Russian or American government, that people like you and me, only with far worse intentions, now have these tools and can engage in relatively sophisticated spying.
And the same goes for the battlefields.
Absolutely. As the war becomes hot, and as battlefield intelligence becomes more important, this sort of surveillance and espionage becomes part of the battlefield and part of the battle plan.
In a lot of cases, it's simple social engineering, but they're very effective at it. The types of targets that they're going after are usually individuals active on Twitter and Facebook, so they don't need to use anything particularly advanced to get the job done.
In Syria, the issue is not only the hacking itself, but the inability of the targets to protect themselves.
You can really no longer be sure what side you're seeing or what kind of actor is involved or whether you're seeing some sort of false flag. It just gets murkier and murkier with every year.
Syria is a country, or used to be a country, that government is watching you by default. You're under surveillance by default. Syrians, they were not able actually to change their behaviors, to know that they have rights of their own privacy or to protect themselves. So the same things applies now on what's going on the cyber conflict in Syria. People have no knowledge about protection, or why do I have to protect myself? I thought that I have pretty good security protocols when it comes to encryption or circumvention or even protocols dealing with people. Unfortunately, until someone came and he was a journalist, not from Syria, and he starts filming me. And he was arrested. And they got access to all our information. And that was the minute that I have to leave the country immediately. So I found that security is not about yourself only, but it's about the whole network that you're working with.
When the pro-democracy movement started in 2011, few could have imagined that Syria would fracture into deadly chaos. And no one could have guessed what an important role the internet would play, not only on the battlefield, but crushing free speech and political reform. While the country's future hangs in the balance, one thing has become certain. Syria offers a terrible window into how the battles of the future can unfold, both off and online.